Okay, before you watch this video, this is the second time that I've uploaded this video, and the first time that I uploaded it, I had made a mistake and didn't cut out a part of the video that should have been cut out, really. But the reason that I took the video down and I'm re-uploading it not because I'm afraid to show you guys real life, because it is real life, but it's not a real look into our marriage, if that makes sense. So basically what happened was I snapped at him like pretty hard because he was being on his phone. This is not an excuse as to why I snapped at him. Like, there was no reason for it, okay? I understand. But I snapped at him because we were like on a super big time crunch, and Azariah was crying, and we were trying to get this podcast done, and just like seeing him be on his phone was like distracting. But again, it was not a reason for me to snap at him, and somehow that part of the video got left in, and a bunch of people saw that, and it was obviously embarrassing, but because that's not a true like representation of my character, and but it is like real. Like, I do snap at you, and I do snap at you hard, but not like, I think that's the first time that anybody's seen like real life, like right. That is an argument, that is what happened, and I'm taking it out because it doesn't add anything to the actual video.
No. Yeah. So I mean, it's, again, that's real life, and I didn't even see the part, like I didn't ever get to watch the video to where it was left in. But like, if people are on your comments degrading you and saying, "Oh, this is really the kind of person you are," like, if you're watching this and you're one of the people that said that, you're so wrong. Like, this is marriage. Like, yeah, we were frustrated and it happened, but it was resolved. We were perfectly fine. Like, she is not that person at all. And for anybody to say, based off of a 2-second clip or whatever it was, that's her personality, that's the kind of person that she is, like, that's so wrong. She's such a kind, genuine person. The person you see on YouTube is the person that she is. Like, in all the videos where, you know, she's a very joyous person, and she has nothing but unconditional love for me. So
you're trying to make me cry? What's going on here?
I'm just saying, like, it hurts me that people would attack you like that and say that about you, because that's the farthest thing from the truth. And people know, like, we're about keeping it real on the video, but and that's part of real life. If somebody in there can say that they've never gotten frustrated at their partner, you're 100% lying.
Yeah.
You know. So I just think that it was very important for us to do this because of that reason.
Yeah, I didn't want to re-upload the video because it was just kind of embarrassing. Like, it's not needed. Like, we don't need to show you guys that deep of, you know, our fights or my snaps or whatever, and for that to, you know, be shown to 10,000 people who saw the video, it was just like not needed, and it was frustrating and overwhelming. So but he convinced me to re-upload the video, and I'm excited to do that because we still 100% stand behind every single thing that we say in the video. No matter what your opinion is, you can still comment your opinion below on the topic in the video, but we stand behind everything that we say, and we're grateful that you guys are still gonna, you know, support and watch us, even though you got to see a little bit of real life. So yeah, enjoy the video. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Is it picking up my mic?
Mm-hmm.
Copy. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. As you can see, we're about to record a podcast, and I thought it'd be a good idea because I know not everybody listens to podcasts, but I also have my LV in. Not everybody listens to podcasts, so I wanted to make this topic be in 2 different places because I think that it's a really good, important topic. So today we're gonna talk about sex. So if you want the entire episode with every single question, then I will leave, there's always a link to my podcast in the description below, but I'll make it the first link, that way you guys can go and take a listen to all of it. Also, you guys are gonna see behind the scenes of podcasting, and you're probably gonna hear a baby crying. Real life.
For sure.
Okay, ready?
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, baby is crying. All right. Are you gonna stop that?
Exhibit A. Welcome back to the podcast, guys. Today, we're going to be talking about sex because it's an important topic and we don't feel like people talk about it enough, especially in the context of marriage / Christian marriage, or like kind of it's like taboo almost to talk about it in Christian marriage. Like people are scared to, I think. So there's some question. Well, okay, I say some. There's a lot of questions that you guys asked on Instagram related to this topic, and next week we're going to talk about faith in marriage and like struggles in marriage, but this one we wanted to just cover this topic. All right, so we're wasting no time getting into this intense subject. So the first question that you guys asked was about masturbation. Oh, is that how you feel about it? Oh my goodness. Take a drink of water, Craig. This is the realness behind podcasts. I don't edit my podcast except for this times right here. Quit.
Wait, let's go.
Do you have it under control?
I don't know. Hopefully.
It's a very controversial one, and a lot of people have opinions about it, but also we wanted to say that if there is a subject like this that we feel somebody else would maybe talk about better, or like have more of a like straight up biblical opinion about, we're gonna leave links in the show notes below, because there's YouTube video that we watched from, it's called Real Truth Real Quick, and it's a like a pastor who does YouTube videos and stuff about like real truth, like hard subjects, and we watched that about the subject of masturbation. So we're gonna leave that below because it's 100% biblical, very, very, very good in our opinion, and basically exactly what we're gonna say, but we want you to hear it from like that pastor too. So if you have a question about masturbation, please go in the show notes below and watch that YouTube video. But basically what we want to say to start out with is that and this pastor says it, that it's not necessarily the act, it's what it does to us. So do you want to kind of explain what that means?
Right, so he talked about what it can lead to in our thoughts, yeah, and in our physical bodies when it comes to having sex during marriage. So like a lot of times when in the act of masturbation there's lust, it's usually in some form of a reaction to a lust, whatever that might be in your life, but also in the fact that when you do get to the point in your marriage where you are having sex, your body is so used to you masturbating and you pleasuring yourself that it just throws your body, almost like in a shock and like a whirlwind, because
well, and it's just your body is so used to that physical stimulation, yeah, that like having someone else do it, like this pastor talks about how most people are just like, well, I'd rather do it myself at this point because I've been doing it for so long. And I just think that's kind of the point of it all. Like it's kind of a misuse of the intimacy that God has blessed us with, and like the I guess blessing of being physically intimate with somebody else, like that. Those things, those experiences are not meant to be experienced personally. They're meant to be experienced between you and your spouse. So doing something like that outside of marriage, even in marriage, which we'll talk about in a second, it's not going to bring you blessings in your life, like ultimately. And it's basically like no matter what, it's kind of a destructive behavior. And what the pastor says too is he's like, some people would ask like, what if you're deployed or something, and for years or months the wind outside is super loud right now and it's like cracking our windows, so
I think that example was really good.
I didn't get to finish my thought.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. He said, like, if you're deployed or something like that and you gave your husband permission to pleasure himself while you're away, because, like, that's a long time to be away from, like, your spouse. Right. And if that husband was only thinking about his wife, I think that that just comes with a warning. Like, make sure your thoughts are still being pure, and that your intentions when you get back, and like being constantly communicating with your spouse about that too while you're deployed, you know, and not like overdoing it, because he says too, like, you should be able to resist and control yourself enough to where it doesn't get out of hand, if that is your situation or your circumstance. But in my opinion, all in all, I just think that it's something that can turn bad really quickly.
Right. It's just something that should be avoided.
Yeah, should be avoided, because, and if, what we were talking about earlier before we started this podcast is, if you're talking about in the context of marriage and you're talking about masturbation, like self-manual stimulation of your body without your partner there, or, you know, whatever you're doing, it's just like, you should never get to your point in your marriage when you have to do that yourself consistently. If you're getting to that point, you should have a conversation with your spouse about sex and about what you're feeling, and like be real and upfront with them, because it should never get to that point.
Something I really like that pastor said in that video was, sex is a gift from God, and it's a gift that he had created for marriage, and anytime that you misuse a gift, blessing doesn't come from a misuse of a gift. So I think that's a great way to put it. Whether, you know, not looking into it in super, you know, fine details, but like an overall view, sex is a gift, and you're misusing that gift, so there's not going to be a blessing that comes out. Right.
And I think what he was saying too mostly was like, it's not necessarily the act, it's the thoughts around that, and like what happened, your thought process that gets you to that point, and your thought process going through that act is kind of what leads to sin, and what leads to a continual destructive pattern, I guess, whether it's in your marriage or in your future marriage. But we also just want to say that if you're somebody who struggles with this, like, you're not, like, it's okay. Just know that, like, you can ask for help. You can ask for accountability. You can ask for, you know, like, you can talk to your pastor if you have a pastor, or just like ask somebody who you're close to, be like, hey, I'm struggling with this thing right now. Can you keep me accountable? Like, when I feel like I need to do this, can I reach out to you? And that's a level of intimacy with that person that you're gonna have to get to. But I promise you that if you are struggling with this enough, like, you reaching out to somebody and explaining it to them and talking to them is going to be really helpful and fruitful to, you know, to overcome it. Alrighty, next question is body image during sex, or like just body image and intimacy in general. So I think this is more of a question for me, because I have struggled with body image, not even related to marriage, like not even related to sex, just like before I met Craig, I started struggle with body image. I had 2 eating disorders that I really struggled with. So going into my marriage and having to be completely vulnerable with somebody in the context of like intimacy was very hard for me, because I had previous like negative thought patterns that kind of did carry over into our marriage. And we talked about this from the beginning, like when we first got married, we actually we were each other's first, and we waited till marriage to have sex. And going into our first night of our marriage, I remember thinking, like, kind of like hyping myself up for a little bit, just because, well, one, it was the first time we've ever had sex, so it was like obviously a big deal. But I just wanted to be confident and not focus on my body, not focus on what it looked like or what he was thinking that it looked like. I just wanted to be all into that moment, but I really struggled. And we struggled, basically because of me for the first year and a half of our marriage, basically. Because which this is a question I'll answer a little bit later, but I struggled with the desire to, because of my body image issues, and because I just felt like I had these like preconceived notions that because of what I thought about my body, Craig then thought the same things about my body, which was so stupid. But it's like how women think for some reason. So when it comes to body image in marriage or in sex, I had to reconcile that with God. Like, I had to give that to him, and that's most of my testimony also, like in what I do for women. like with weight loss and with understanding body image through the eyes of Christ and stuff like that, like I had to reconcile that with God and be like, hey, I'm struggling with body image so much. Sex is something that I want to be fully into because it is such a blessing and it's something that, you know, you gave us. And I just feel like the enemy is driving a wedge between us because of this thing that like I know I can overcome. So a lot of my healing when it comes to body image in relation to sex was giving it to God and a lot of prayer and a lot of communication with Craig, because there was a lot of times when I didn't want to have sex and he wouldn't know why, and to him it was just rejection, but to me it was like I'm gross, and he didn't understand that because I didn't tell him.
Yeah, it is a very, very real thing, and you just said it. Make sure you communicate that with your partner. If that is something that you struggle with, I can see why that would be something you might be afraid to bring up to your partner, because you know, to some guys it might seem kind of silly, but you have to bring that up so that that's on the table, and that you know, if you do bring it up, or if he tries to initiate something and then you do say no, at least you have that to put on the table as to why, and you can talk through. And if you talk through it, you can eventually overcome it, but you'll never overcome it if you aren't talking it through with your partner.
But also, with that, I used that excuse one too many times, I think, in the first year and a half of our marriage. Like it was kind of constantly my excuse where I was like, no, I feel gross, I don't want to, and was just kind of like constantly shooting down. And in your first year and a half of marriage, that's not like ideal. Like you really shouldn't be doing that. Like you should be coming together and communicating about that area of your life so often, because it is such a place that the enemy has his hand in your marriage. Like people say all the time, sex and money is like the biggest two things that the enemy attacks in your marriage. And what I realized though is that it's not even like just sex. Like the enemy uses things around sex to infiltrate sex. Does that make sense? Like my body image was 100% the thing in the beginning that made me not want to, and that made us struggle with it. It wasn't the act of sex. It was my confidence in my body, in myself. So what I would say to women too, and I kind of already said this, like communicate with your husband about it. But first and foremost, like you have to overcome that. And you have to realize that the things that you think about your body, your husband is most likely not thinking about your body.
That's what I was getting ready to say. For women listening that are struggling with that, I can almost guarantee you 99.99% sure that he is not thinking those things about you.
Yeah.
Especially in a moment.
But also, I know as a woman who has struggled with this, doesn't matter how many times you tell me, you're beautiful, your body is beautiful, I just didn't believe you, because I was so sure that you were thinking those things, because I was so sure that I was gross or that like my body was not good enough. It was just so silly, because they didn't marry you for your body, but like obviously they find your body attractive.
Right.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But it's just such a toxic thought that just ruins everything. What do you do if you are tempted to give in before marriage? Do you want to take it away?
Yeah, no, that can be tricky for sure, because temptation is definitely real, definitely there, especially if you're really passionate about saving yourself. That's when the enemy is going to really come into your life and give you every single opportunity and tempt you in every single way to do so. So I think really, if that's what you want and that's what you're going to aim for, is you have to tell the person you're with that you do not want to have sex. If you put it out there,
that has to be a boundary.
Yeah, it has to be a boundary, and it's definitely just between you and that person. And I think a lot of these questions, really, it can boil down to you talking to your partner about it, because I think a lot of people are kind of afraid to talk with their partner about having sex and boundaries during sex and just everything involved in that. So if that's something that you're passionate about, you have to make sure that the person you're with knows, and they verbally tell you, okay, I respect that, we will not, and make them commit to you on that.
Yeah, and I think that if you're a woman talking about you want to put in that boundary, because a lot of times it's not the guy who's going to initiate that boundary. it's harder for them to do that. So if you're a woman and you're wanting to initiate that boundary, it's almost like you're scared to do that because you're scared of rejection, than being like, no, like, I'm not okay with that, or them just completely like being like, all right, well, thank you, next. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's a very real fear, because that happens sometimes. But just like Craig said, it's setting those boundaries and sticking to them, because if anything, I don't want to like stereotype here, but I know from experience when I've had a friend who has wanted to put those boundaries, who has like been intimate in their dating relationship before, and wanted to then set boundaries, and that was so much harder for her because they had already went that far, and then wanting to set boundaries was like so difficult. But I told her, like, you have to mutually agree on this and constantly communicate about how important it is to both of you, if it is important to both of you, and then get accountability for it. Like 100% get accountability, which is, it's like not, accountability is never really like fun, because it's somebody checking in on you on something that is not really, it's super vulnerable and raw and real, and it's, you have to find the person in your life who's going to be real with you, and you're going to be able to communicate with them about that.
Yeah, so it's definitely easier, like, from our perspective, we can give advice on how we did it and how, Christians can do it. Mm-hmm. If you believe in Christ, because, throughout our entire relationship, we tried to do our best to read the Bible together and grow in our faith together and share that walk. And that just made it, honestly, that much easier, because
mm-hmm.
we were...
Oh, that's good.
We were focusing on the ultimate goal, which was trying to grow closer together in God together, and that kind of trumped that temptation, because our thoughts were on Christ and
right. When your thoughts are on Christ, you're not going to be tempted to do things that are not right. Christ.
But if let's say you are a virgin and the person you're dating is not, I mean, that's definitely tough.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't been there personally, so that it's definitely something, again, that you just have to ask that person, hey, what can we do to make sure that we keep this special thing for me until we're married, right. So on and so forth.
And please do not downplay prayer in this, okay? Because if you are in the scenario where you're a virgin and your partner is not, prayer for them and for your boundaries and intimacy is going to work. Like, above all things, if you pray for that person to be on the same level as you are, and to be able to set those boundaries and stick to those boundaries, like, I believe that's the most powerful thing that you can do, really.
Sure.
Next one is, did you get the talk, in quotes? You wanna start?
Yeah, I mean, I remember bits and pieces from growing up, with my parents telling me, that I should wait until marriage, and that, sex was kind of a big deal. But I guess I don't remember the exact time of, having the full conversation about it. Not to say that it didn't happen, but I don't recall that. But I do remember them making it a point to say that it is something that should wait until marriage.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. My parents were really good at parenting my brother and I, very, very good. But I'm sure they did have the conversation with me, but again, just like Craig, I don't remember ever sitting down in the bedroom or anything and having the birds and the bees talk. We talked about it in sex ed in school, and I learned about all the things on the bus driving to school, because all the boys were like, do you know what this is? Like, I mean, it was just, the things you learn on the school bus is absolutely ridiculous. So that's where most of my knowledge comes from. But I think from just a young age, even when I wasn't necessarily had a relationship with Christ, I knew from the start, like from the youngest age, I was like, I'm saving myself till marriage. Like, wanting to save that part of me for my husband and honor God in that way was just so important to me. And Craig and I have talked about this frequently in our marriage, that like, it was just like, it was never even a like option for us, which I will never discount the fact that Craig is like that. And I found a man who was just as willing to wait as I was, because that is hard to find. And that's a lot of relationships right now, where one person is like, I don't really mind not waiting, and the other person is like, I really want to wait, but I also want to make you happy.
Yeah.
And so I don't necessarily understand that struggle. Actually, lying. In every relationship that I had before Craig, I was pressured just about every single time I was alone with this person to have sex. Like, so pressured. And in high school, I made it known to basically everyone that I was not going to, because I had many relationships in my high school, and the guys would pressure me and I would say no, and then they'd break up with me, and then they'd tell their friend that I was a slut or whore or whatever they wanted to tell me, and I would straight up be like, that's actually really not true. Like, I'm never going to do that, because that's something that I cherish about my relationship with God, and I want to honor him in that way. I got made fun of. I got slander. I mean, like, it was really, really bad.
Definitely a different experience than
it
what
was,
I had in high school, with people knowing that that's the way I was.
Right, and it's weird though, because as a guy, I feel like as a guy, you're more pressured to have sex in high school or before marriage. And for you to not have that experience, and for me to be literally made fun of and pressured in every relationship is like tough.
I don't know if I ever told you this, but I remember one day, it was my senior year, and we sat down at a lunch table, and somehow it got brought up, and some guy was getting ready to tell the story of how I lost virginity. He said, "Oh, you mean the day I became a man," or something about that's when I really became a man. So I looked at him and I said, "So you're saying that you're more of a man than me because you've had sex?" And he was like, "Well, no, that's really not what I meant." I was like, "Okay." And I called him out on it. He was like, kind of took him back in his seat.
That makes me love you so much right now. That is awesome. I can't even imagine how many people that you influenced positively in your desire to wait. Because I'm sure you didn't like keep it hush hush, right?
No, I was honest at any time somebody asked me. Also,
that was one of the first things that Craig and I talked about when we first started. We talked. It was the thing to talk before you dated. When we were talking, that was something that we made very clear in our relationship, that we wanted to put God first. We wanted to just honor him in that way together. And for me, having every single relationship I've been in before Craig, that was like the biggest shocker of my life. Because I remember we were sitting in the Ivanhoe's parking lot and we were talking about all the things, and I was crying to you and you were crying to me in the most manly way. And I told you that, like, I hope that you know that I want to save myself for marriage. And you were like, hey, me too. And then we start crying more. And it was really, really awesome. But I don't want you, if you're listening to this, to feel defeated or like you're in the wrong relationship if you are in a relationship where your partner is having difficulties waiting, because that is a struggle in today's world. Very much a struggle. But I think, again, it comes down to communication, to boundaries, to prayer and accountability, and knowing what the word says about it is ultimately. And just like we said earlier, if you're in constant communication in your relationship with that person, with God, you're gonna be less likely to want to do things that are against what God says, basically. Okay, guys, remember to love God, love yourself, and love people, and check us out in the next one. Bye.
And time to go worship. Bye.